She turned a rumor into my reality. 10 years of silence, shame, and panic attacks. Then she showed up, with a daughter and a confession that wrecked me. The woman who tried to ruin my life sat across from me last week and apologized, and for a long, stupid minute I couldn't tell if I wanted to punch her, cry, or, I don't know, hand her my keys and say, take it, take everything, I'm tired. That's how it started, with me staring at her like she was a ghost wearing last season's sweater and a face that still looked 30, even though 10 years had happened to both of us. 10 years ago, I was 20, loud laughing, convinced I'd never leave the campus town unless it was for a better campus. I had a roommate named Erica. She called herself R, like that made her cooler, and we fit together the way two chipmugs do, imperfect, warm in different places. She was funny in a way that made people lean in, and I wanted to be the person who got invited to sit in that lean. I liked being liked. I still do. It's embarrassing, but true. We shared ramen, admission essays, bad breakups, the kind of secrets that feel small at the time because you're 20 and everything is supposed to be sloppy and surviving. She said my name with a laugh that made my chest open up. We walked to class together. She drank coffee like it was oxygen. And then, one spring, she told a story. I wish I could be precise about the night it started. Maybe it was a Thursday, maybe the library smelled of antiseptic and cheap perfume, but memory blurs the edges the way spilled water blurs a photo. What I remember is a rumor handed to the wrong people like a match near dry grass. She slept with Professor Caldwell. R said, at first like it was gossip, and then like it was art. It was a sentence that had nothing to do with me and then, somehow, became everything. It's weird how fast humans will believe a story that confirms their worst, how eager people are to slot you into a box and lock the lid. The rumor made a ceremony of my humiliation. Friends I'd stayed up with on winter nights stopped answering texts. The student government rep, who'd once praised my project, refused to talk to me in the hallway. There were murmurs in class and eyes that went cold. Professors who had nodded at my questions now looked through me. Someone I never found out who made flyers. Someone might have made a meme. A private Discord channel populated with speculation bloomed and grew teeth. I went to the administration because I wanted the lie exposed. I read the emails now, and they feel like they were written by someone else. Accusatory, procedural, assumes motive. They asked me to come to a meeting where 3 people and a notepad seemed to already have decided. I cried in front of them. I said it was untrue. I offered my phone, my friends, my roommate's name. They let me go with a caution and a look that suggested trouble would follow me like a shadow. It followed. The dean asked questions that suggested they wanted to protect the professor's career. The professor wouldn't speak on the record. The student investigation was an in-between place, not quite formal, not quite rumor, but loud enough to make landlords decline renewal and to make my scholarship committee pause. My financial aid was suddenly slippery. People who had ideas of me whispered to people who had power. I remember the way a locker room full of men stopped their jokes and then looked at me as if I was the punchline. I transferred. It felt like stepping off a cliff because I had to believe there was a ground below. I packed what fit in 2 suitcases and left behind a life I had imagined. Student government, volunteer work, a summer internship that would have been listed on a future resume. I left behind friendships that were cheap enough to discard a person. For years after, I thought of myself as something damaged. I developed panic attacks that for a while I called cold flashes because that felt more scientific and less like a confession. I hated being in groups. I would choose a table at a coffee shop against the wall because the back gave me a sense of being unseeable, which felt like safety. I moved cities, changed majors, took a job that paid the bills, and didn't require small talk. Sometimes I thought I'd been punishing myself by staying small. Other times I felt grateful that the world seemed less interested in me. It's easy to narrativize pain. You get good at turning your life into lessons for yourself. Resilience, boundaries, gratitude. But the truth is there are soft, tender, stupid parts that don't get taught in therapy manuals. I lost a version of myself that liked being in front of groups, and for a long time I warned myself against ever wanting that back. I didn't want to be hurt again. So I built a careful life, a job that kept my head down, friendships that were slow and exacting, a partner who listened and sometimes understood that the word visit came with 100 tiny anxieties. And then last Tuesday a message showed up in my inbox. No return address, just a name that could have been a glitch. Is it okay if we meet? I stared at the text until the coffee cooled. My hands knew the dance. Delete, block, ignore. But my throat remembered those nights of noodle soup and tearful essays. Part of me was still, absurdly, curious. I messaged back yes because curiosity is a stupid honest hand, and because part of me wanted, I don't even know. Closure? A public humiliation corrected? Maybe a new rumor. Maybe to see if she looked like she'd aged into regret. After she tracked me down, I couldn't even look at my phone without thinking about who else was waiting to decide whether I was guilty. The meeting was set at a bakery because both of us apparently think pastries soften everything. She asked for the corner table. Her mouth trembled before she started. She smelled like cheap floral soap and desperation. I remember the first thing she said that wasn't a sentence but a sob. She cried in a way that sounded like a confession and a plea at once. And then she told me everything, or at least she told me what she said she remembered, which might not be the same as the truth. After that night, I couldn't even look at my phone without seeing the ghosts of the past, little black notification bubbles that felt like verdicts. But I watched her hands instead, because they were the most human thing in the room. Knuckles white, a ring she kept twisting, nails chewed to ragged crescents. The bakery noise softened around her voice. She started like someone trying to remember a dream, and then, because she'd rehearsed this in the shower or at 3 a.m. or in the nameless hours people confess to themselves, she began to tell me the plumbing. How the lie started, how she fed it, how it turned into a flood.
It was stupid, she said.
It started stupid. She gave dates that I couldn't bear to verify and details that stuck to my ribs. A spring party in the quad, someone dared her to say something shocking. A group chat that liked to manufacture drama, a screenshot she posted anonymously because she wanted to see what would happen. She said the rumor was a sentence she put on a message board like a pebble tossed into a lake, small, thoughtless, and then watched the ripples. But the pebble, she said, had been crafted. She tacked on a time, a location, a specificity that made it believable, and then, when people messaged her and asked, she confirmed, because, and here she stopped and looked at me like she might lose the shape of her voice, because she liked to be included. I wanted to be with the people who whispered the loudest, she said. You know how it is, someone says something, and then all the other people want to be the one who knows everything. I wanted to be the one who knew. It made a kind of terrible sense. She painted it like a poverty of attention. Not enough at home, not enough in classes, a childhood where she learned to fold herself until she was small enough to be seen only by people who pointed. I wanted to ask why she'd pick me, why she couldn't just invent a story about someone else. But that's the thing with jealousy. You pick the nearest flame, sometimes the one that warms you, and would also burn you if you were careless. She said she kept going because the attention felt like currency. First they invited her out more. They noticed her outfit. A girl named Jules, who'd never looked twice, suddenly laughed at her jokes in class. In the weeks I remember as a blur, the cooling of friends, the sudden silences, she was at a table that now sat differently, head tilted toward a better corner. It made me feel like I belonged, she whispered, and I could hear the shape of the old wound behind the word. Then she told me the part that almost made me laugh, except that there was nothing funny about it. She had kept adding details because people asked, and it spiraled. Someone made a meme. Someone copied the post into a forum. Someone's boyfriend showed it to a professor as a joke, as if it were a thing to trade. Someone might have seen it and thought it was an explanation for why I didn't do a group project. Someone might have said, "Oh, that's why she skipped last week." The administrative wheels started to turn. Someone else did the rest. She tried to explain the practical things she did and didn't do.
She didn't hack my email.
She didn't falsify documents. She didn't physically hurt me. And the weirdness of hearing that list, the small ways the world gets tilted that aren't criminal but are catastrophic, sat in my teeth like sugar. She apologized for the harm she caused to my scholarship, for the landlord who turned cold at the whisper of controversy, for my internship evaporating. She apologized for the nights I spent on the bathroom floor, hands over my mouth, trying to stop my breath from spooling out. She apologized for the panic attacks she made into a noun for me. "Your panic," she said, like it was a thing with a catalog number. And then she told me why she was telling me now. "I had a kid," she said, like a confession. She'd said things before that peeled at me, that she'd lost nights of sleep, that she'd been in therapy, but the kid landed differently, like a bell. She described a small voice asking her what people do when they've done something bad. Her daughter asked why people lie and who pays for it. She couldn't answer with the old evasions. She said she thought about me, about the way I'd vanished from the campus, about a girl who left with 2 suitcases because the world had chosen to believe a story over a person, and she couldn't. She couldn't have that story living inside her anymore. I believe people make different choices when lice of conscience crawl under their skin. Maybe that's romanticizing her shifting. Maybe it's a necessary lie to make sense of why someone who had sat with me over cheap ramen and said, "We're co-workers in this life, okay?" would set a match to me. She said she had been haunted, which felt both rote and true. It followed me, she said. In jobs, in relationships. I thought if I told you, that would be the only way to stop being it. I don't know why I expected a scene. I expected the cinematic hurling of a coffee cup or a scream that would make windows rattle. Maybe I expected anger that would feel righteous and loud because being small for 10 years had taught me the taste of quiet. Instead, the apology washed over me in the way small waves wash ashore, incremental, wearing. My chest fit into 10 years of silence in a strangling way that surprised me. Old images, locker room whispers, a scholarship committee's curious look, a professor's polite non-denial, flipped through me like photographs. I could see the landlord's face when I told him I was leaving, resigned, like someone closing a book. I could feel the panic in the car as I drove out of town with 2 suitcases. My hands on the wheel were knotted with the memory of wanting to be invisible.
She kept talking.
She admitted she never meant for me to have to leave school. She said she didn't know the mechanics of how rumors metastasize. She was, apparently, a small act that triggered a lot. She said she'd come to me 100 times in the last decade but couldn't. She was ashamed, fearing what I might do. She told me the part one already knew but needed someone to say to my face. She understood that an apology couldn't undo late-night loneliness or missed opportunities. I don't know what to ask of you, she said. Her voice was so small then that it could have been swallowed by the hum of the espresso machine. Maybe nothing. I don't know. I needed to say it. I needed you to know I did it. And, oh God, the sentence that followed, because she had the audacity to say something that made my teeth ache. I thought if I told you, maybe you'd say you're okay. Maybe you'd tell me that you forgave me. Maybe I could stop hating myself. I wanted to tell her that forgiveness isn't a thing you hand out like change. I wanted to tell her that she cannot unmake the years I learned to shrink. I wanted to tell her about the nights I sat in the dark thinking this had been a punishment for some private sin. I wanted to scream that there was no sin I could imagine that deserved 10 years of erasure. I wanted to tell her all of that and more, and less at the same time. Instead, I swallowed. My mouth tasted like stale bread. I realized I was holding my breath. I said, "Finally, why now?" She looked at me like she'd been waiting for that question her whole life, and she said, "Because I can't sleep. Because my daughter asked. Because I am sick of being someone who makes other people's lives smaller to feel bigger." There it was, the turning point that felt like a hinge. Her story landed. My life unspooled in reply. I sat there with 1,000 rehearsed responses crowding my throat, and none of them fit, because none of them could suddenly stitch 10 years back in place. I wanted to tear the tablecloth off the table. I wanted to throw her phone into the window. I wanted to crawl into one of those tiny pastry cases and hide. Instead, I said nothing for a long time, which felt like its own kind of answer. After that night, I couldn't even look at my phone without flinching, like the little rectangle might sprout teeth. So I looked at her. She was small across from me, the same height she'd always been, which hit me weirdly, like time had done its slow damage to other things but left the body the same, and that felt unfair in a way I couldn't name. The bakery hummed around us. A kid behind us knocked over a chair, and the mother apologized profusely, and for a second I was grateful for the noise. It gave me space to breathe. I did the unlikely thing then. I spoke. Not with the righteous, cinematic speech I'd whispered to myself in the dark for years. Not the one that would make things right like sutures. I spoke in stuttering honesty, in the only currency I had left. "You ruined me," I said. It was not theatrical. It was not a slam of a gavel. It was a flat fact, the kind you tell a doctor about a broken bone. You said something. People believed you. I left school. I lost a scholarship. I had nights I still can't really put words around. I made choices because I was scared. She folded in on herself, like paper being closed. She put her hands to her face, and for a second the room smelled of Baby Six Sweet and cleaning syrup. I knew in that moment that apology alone was never going to be the end. Apology was a door. What mattered was what happened after. "I know," she said, which was a small thing, but also heavy. I know. What I needed, what I finally realized I needed in that bakery with the pastry under glass I didn't want was not theatrics. I didn't want to scream. I wanted to be seen in the full geometry of the damage, which is a weird ask, I know. I wanted her to understand the arithmetic of what she'd set in motion. So I told her, exact and cruel and precise the way math is, the way you can measure a body of water and know what's missing. I had panic attacks, I said, because saying it made it less ghostly. I would hide in bathrooms at work because the idea of someone asking me a casual question would make me dizzy. I stopped applying for programs. I stopped saying yes to things I wanted because I was too afraid of being looked at and found wanting. There are people who wonder where I went. There are resumes that never existed because you wrote me into a story I didn't live. Her hands stopped trembling. She listened like someone taking notes for a confession. There was shame there, heavy and animal, and maybe something like guilt, which is not the same as reparation. I don't know what to say, she breathed. I don't know how to fix it. Then don't say anything that looks like fixing, I told her. Do things. Make it real. And I listed things. I know that sounds transactional. Maybe it was. Maybe it was the only way to translate an apology out of the abstract and into something that could at least try to realign the scales. Write to everyone you lied to. Post a correction where you first posted it. Tell the people you whispered with that you made it up. Tell the administration what you did, so they can note it. If you're serious, pay for. I hesitated because I'm not a ledger person, but I had a number in my head that I imagined as therapy hours. Therapy for me. Contribute. Help me get my name back into the places you took it out of. She began to cry in earnest then, the kind of loud, ugly sob that breaks through a decade of training. I'll do it, she said. I'll do all of it. I will. I can't promise it'll fix, her voice broke. But I will. We argued, too. I said things I half regretted, like the nights when I said, "Do you even remember me at all? And do you remember the landlord's face? And did it feel nice to be the one with the story?" She said yes to some and no to others. She said she didn't see it as hurtful at the time because she was small in other ways. It was messy. It was human. It didn't make anything simpler. In the days after, she did the small things. She messaged a couple people who had been part of the rumor mill and said she had started something false and she was sorry. She posted a mea culpa on her scant public profiles. She wrote an email to the administration admitting that she'd spread a rumor and asking them to note that the origin was false. It wasn't a televised redress. Most of the people she messaged didn't answer. One of the professors she contacted replied with a terse, "Thank you for clarifying," and nothing else. My scholarship had already closed in a drawer of time that can't be reopened, and internships weren't a thing you gave back. But some small windows opened. A few former friends texted to say they were sorry. They hadn't known it was a lie. They'd followed the crowd. Some reached out in private to apologize for how they'd treated me. Those messages felt both salve and salt. Better than nothing. Worse than everything I had hoped for. I learned something about the shape of slow forgiveness. It doesn't bloom in a single sentence. It is a drip like water in a cave, making stalagmites of new boundaries. I forgave in pieces. I forgave the part of her that was a kid trying to be seen. I did not forgive the cruelty as an abstraction. I didn't promise to be friends. I told her, "I forgive you because I want to stop carrying you like a weather system over my life." But forgive doesn't mean forget, and it sure as hell doesn't mean erase. Maybe that sounds cold. Maybe it sounds merciful. It felt like both. There were nights where I woke with the old cold in my chest and had to remind myself that forgiveness is not a floor you sink into. It's a ceiling you build, slow, with the bricks of your own choosing. The daughter? She reached out later, a timid text message a month after the bakery, saying she had asked her mother about the thing and was sorry on behalf of being a kid who asked a question. I didn't reply. Part of me was relieved. Part of me was weirdly proud that the ripple had finally reached her world. But I didn't want to start a relationship I wasn't ready for. That would have been performative penance. Now, weeks later, my life is not unmade. It is simply rearranged, with a new corner cleared where a thing used to live. I told my partner about the meeting, and he listened and then made tea and sat with me while I cried over small, ridiculous things, and then we watched trashy TV because humans need filler. I applied for a fellowship last month that I wouldn't have before, because before I still wore a code of surviving. This time I wrote with a voice that didn't have a rumor in it like a stone in its pocket. The apology didn't fix a decade. It didn't buy back Miss Summers or lost mentors. But it did something like unhook a hand from my jacket. It made room for me to lean forward again, just a little, into the light that unfashionably, stubbornly, still existed for me.